The one recipe for failing to capture value is to choose to not play the game and to not learn and understand where these technologies go and how they work, because those are the people who are basically saying, oh, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. It's the way my grandparents did it and the way their grandparents did it. And now the whole industry is somewhere else and they can't find work. And that, I think, is the place business owners need to be. Is you might not need to be like a whole hog. I love this. I'm excited. It's amazing. But you at least need to understand it and the implications on your market business and where it might be helpful for you.
Welcome to Modern Logic for Your Business, where we talk about how to put AI and technology to work in real companies. I'm Andy Ron, and with me is Dustin Brusnak. Today, Dustin and I talk about selling your house with AI and how to talk to people who think AI is terrible or just don't understand how to use it yet. And some other interesting research that came out of Gallup about AI adoption across leadership and contributors at companies. But before we jump in, if you're thinking about how AI can apply to your business, we'd love to help. You can schedule a free 30-minute working session with us right now at molo.now. That's MOLO.NOW. All right, let's get into it. A man used ChatGPT to sell his house, not because AI is a real estate agent, but why would you do this? Anyway, interesting story. It was in the New York Times.
Yeah, why did he do it? First of all, what was it? Just a demonstration of AI's capabilities, or was he having some sort of difficulty with the traditional?
Okay, I have a lot of takes on this. One is, yes, it was an interesting, kind of impressive demonstration of AI's capabilities, that he was able to successfully list and get offers in all but the closing, where he did hire actual attorney to deal with.
So this was successful.
It was successful. Weirdly, the headline writers always mess with it, and they say, man tries to sell house. Hate to spoil or bury the lead. It was a success. He did it. But as with all these anecdotal one-offs, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure I really care, because the author is not a realtor. So as with so many times in AI, when you go in, I don't know bubkiss about whatever, growing soybeans. If you ask AI to tell you about growing soybeans, you'll be like, wow, AI knows so much about growing soybeans. It's amazing. But do you have any own knowledge to bring to bear to verify if that's true, or if it's just making shit up, or if it's doing a terrible job at growing soybeans?
Soybean expert is AI is terrible at soybeans, right?
Yeah,
but I think the counter to that, I would say, on this is, for a long time in AI world, for at least the last 6 months, we've been talking about how things like brokerage and information movement companies are going to start losing value really rapidly, because they exist to reduce the friction between the buyer and the actual inevitable seller, the producer of value. And realtors are an incredible example of a brokerage type environment. You're paying them often tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, to sell your house. And what do they actually do?
Well,
they go and find listings. They look at, they say they do a lot, but I've bought houses.
I think realtors are going to have to step up their game, because the easy things, yes, are going to be automated and taken away from them. But let's face it, like the MLS systems and so forth have been doing that for decades already. I think, I'm not a realtor, but I've worked with some realtors that impressed me. And what I think makes a difference is the things outside of that box that they do. Knowing, hey, you should replace the carpet in this room. It'll cost you $5,000, but you can ask for 15 grand more. It's a 3x win on your investment. This guy who used AI, as far as I know, he didn't do that. Or how do you stage a house for a presentation? Do you do an open house? Like those sorts of mental things that can position this asset, that's incredibly valuable asset, as more valuable in potential buyers' eyes. A 10% lift in the perceived value, that's 50 grand or something, which would pay for the cost of the realtor. And actually in the article, he admits that. It's, maybe I could have gotten more for this, but most of what I got more for would have gone to the realtor as commission.
There was an
So
example, and this goes back to one of the examples in the Freakonomics book, right? Around how realtors, because they get a percentage of the transaction, aren't really incentivized to increase the value of the transaction because the amount of time it takes to do that is not worth it versus flipping another house. They get a higher value, higher cash
yeah,
flow from flipping a house. So, like I think most industries, what we're going to see is AI is going to eat that bottom section of the energy of the industry. It's not that realtors aren't capable of providing value, but there's plenty of realtors who are phoning it in on a lot of these
yeah, it could
properties.
be.
Those people are going to go and not be effective anymore, and it is going to be the people that are providing maybe additional types of value or additional services. Like the realtor I used to purchase my previous house literally just phoned it in. I saw them maybe 2 times and
Yeah,
did nothing. And I ended up looking at the bill going, why did I pay
yeah.
$12,000 or whatever it ended up being? Meanwhile, the realtor I used to purchase this house, like he was very hands-on, very
I
active.
know the realtor that we used to buy this house. He was amazing. He drove us
Yeah.
all around town. We didn't live in this city yet, and so he was our knowledge base for what are good neighborhoods, what are the pros and cons of different parts of the town you could
And
live
then
in.
super friendly. So the
Yeah.
customer service was really
Hmm.
good. And it was just a night and day difference. So there's a huge disparity. And I think the people that are competing at the top end, just like software development, don't necessarily have to worry as much. It's the
Yeah.
people that are on the bottom end. And maybe there are some economic changes as well. But I think overall, to your point, like my guess is if you read between the lines on why he felt like he was able to do this is he purchased houses in the past or he was aware of the real estate market and he was looking at the amount of money that the realtors take and he was trying to save that for
Yeah, he
himself.
was.
And that is a
And
big chunk of change
it is.
that you would have to increase the value of your house pretty significantly in order to compensate yourself for the seller
Well, and
realtor
it's not
side.
like the author was unbiased. He had a vested interest in writing this article for the New York Times about how AI
Right.
could do the thing. And so he made it work. And
Right.
does that mean that all of us could make it work? No, because it's still at the end of the day, you need human verification for AI output, and you don't know what you don't know. And so if you bring in AI to solve a problem you know nothing about the problem domain, you're taking a big risk because it could be missing some key fact that would be a huge difference. And it's going to just not tell you, and it won't know, and you won't know until it's too late.
The house collapses the day after you
Yeah.
purchase it, right?
You were
But I do
you were
think
supposed to have an inspection?
we are going to continue to see AI get deployed more and more where the average answer is good enough. And even in these really expensive financial transactions, there are a ton of businesses that have been built on arbitrage in the middle, low margin businesses that their job is to reduce friction for uninformed buyers. And I think we are going to see that buyers that are willing to inform themselves are going to have more capabilities and are
Oh,
going to
yeah.
start eating away at the margin of those business. So it's a like we've been saying for a while, it's a jagged benefits, right? There's going to be some people that are winners and
Yeah.
some people that are losers. And I think this is a good example of he sold his house. It was successful. He did his research. There's obviously a bunch of background. He could have gotten more. He maybe could have gotten less, but it's an example of something that he couldn't have done at all 2 years ago that he can now do. And how will that change over the next few years? Is maybe there's a SaaS company that's sellyourhouse.com or whatever that handles some of that knowledge for you and builds in more
Yeah.
intelligence into
Well,
that system.
and this industry has been changing and adapting to internet for a long time. So in
Right.
some ways, it's just an incremental improvement that now it's a little bit more on the self-serve end if you want to go that way.
And we're
Yeah.
seeing it's interesting now start seeing we are at the phase where the trends and the philosophy of where we think the technology is going to hit everyday life, we're starting to see those get played out. And we're starting to see that we actually, to some degree, could predict a year ahead that some of this stuff would be happening. And I think that it feels that's helpful because it helps pank down the uncertainty that people are feeling around where this technology is going. And the reality is when you look at the sort of disruptions that we are seeing this year, they're not dissimilar from the similar kind of disruptions we saw when the internet came out or when mobile came
Mm-hmm.
out. And you saw these businesses suddenly have to scramble to shore up some part of their business that was
the whole
based
spectrum.
on the old technology.
Some people are like fingers in their ears going, "La, I'm not going to change," and then you have the upstarts who are like, "No, there's this opportunity." So we'll see all of that.
Yeah, which gets me, I think, is a natural segue to my bit of news, which is there was a Gallup poll about AI adoption in organizations, and it was really interesting. So I think most people who are working in knowledge worker fields probably wouldn't be surprised by this. The AI adoption amongst the leadership team is actually really high comparative to other technologies, but we're not seeing as much AI adoption inside of the operations team, no matter how much the leaders push.
Is this just in software or in industry across the board?
This is across industries. And so this Gallup poll, they went in and they interviewed leaders, and then they interviewed organizations. And when you have this really, it's almost like a bipolar conversation. When you go talk to a leader about what AI is going to do in their organization, they're deeply excited, they're using it daily, they can see their whole business changing. And then you go and talk to an operator in that business, and they aren't using it. They're still doing the day-to-day things the way they used to be.
Is it
they
because
don't understand the tools?
Like they don't have licenses to Claude Code or something, and that's why they're not using it?
So there's a whole lot of information in the poll, which we should link in the notes. But there was a couple big trends. So the biggest trend is that organizations that saw AI implementation all the way down to the leaf, to the individual contributors, their leaders were not just engaged with AI, but they were engaged with making AI useful for their team members. So they were actively providing resources and time and licenses and guidance on the best way to use these things and governance. And broadly, when you look at the people not using it, there were three rough categories, right? They people who were compared about the ethics. That was actually that was a big double-digit percentage, but it was the smallest of them, less than 25%. There were people who who were concerned that it couldn't do the work. Who literally thought AI can't do my job.
Yeah.
Even though empirical evidence suggests that
there's nuance there.
There's nuance, but
AI can't do most jobs, but AI can make most jobs easier.
So this is people who thought AI couldn't help at all.
Okay.
And the evidence from the Gallup poll is they're not right about that. This is a bias because they haven't been shown AI doing good work, and they don't know how to get it to do good work. Things like training them on prompting, right? The people who have no training in AI are the soybean person. They're getting the bad example, and they're looking at the technology saying, my leadership is full of crap. They're being sold a bill of goods. There's smoke, no fire, right? And the reality is like the poll very clearly explains that if you go into organizations where the leaders are directly trying to work against that, knowing that's an issue, those organizations are seeing more AI enablement in their employees. And that's because it is useful in a lot of these cases. But if you just try it one time and no one's training you.
I feel like we literally talked to an example like this yesterday. Leadership using it, amazed, getting great results, tries to make it available to the team, and folks aren't doing it. And then all of the rough edges are just like accumulating. Like skills are super powerful, but how do you share skills amongst your team if they're all using Claude Desktop? It turns out it's not easy enough. And so there's a way. There's probably 1,000 ways. And yet when rubber meets the road, people are just, I tripped over that and I just gave up. But without the right skills and the right setup, the tool is not nearly as good as it could be. And so you're trying to use it without getting it set up properly, and then the output is no good.
Yeah. And I think that sort of gets to the biggest one, which is they don't know how to use it in a way that's safe, that keeps their data private. They haven't been told the right way to use it. They aren't being given the tools or the education to use it in, say, a legal environment or with financial data or with client data. And so many of our jobs touch that stuff that they're concerned that they're going to start using it and get in trouble because they pasted the wrong thing into the chat interface or what have you. No one is giving them that guidance. There's no clearly established governance. There's no clear, visible, right way to do things. And so it creates a really interesting scenario where your leadership team is saying, you guys have to use this or we're going to get disrupted, and this is so great. And you're basically pushing on an employee who would happily use it if you could make it work for them in a way that wasn't going to cause you to turn around and say, but wait,
those employees, because I feel like I can totally relate. So for example, I'm an expert in the thing I do or did, write software. I know the programming languages. I know how to use the tools. I know all the gotchas about how to make it so that it doesn't crash, all this. And now I'm saying, oh, we'll use this tool to help write your software. So I'm not actually writing it anymore. In fact, I have to learn, though. I can't just turn it on and say, okay, tool, do it. No, I have to learn how to use the tool properly, because if you don't use it correctly, this can lead to bad outcomes. And there was an anecdote just recently that came out. There's this open source tool called Rsync. It's been around for decades. It's really great. It lets you copy files from one machine to another and keep them in sync. It's very efficient. And it has a zillion options. And also it works on every computer ever created. There's a lot of AI security research going on. This thing called, we mentioned before, Mythos from Anthropic. And so these open source tools are basically getting inundated with reports of security and other bugs in their software that had gone unnoticed for decades. But now that we're known, it's a problem because someone could take advantage of those bugs and do bad things. So the maintainers of open source tools are basically drowning in new work that they have to do. And at the same time, there's this thing, hey, this AI coder will fix all these things. And so there's one volunteer maintainer, a retired software engineer who works on this tool, said, all right, the way I'm going to deal with this is I'm going to use AI to help me get all this set up. And he had a big plan. He wrote a blog post about the architecture, but he's not a day in, day out user of AI. And so he made some of the classic AI mistakes, as well as some of the classic human mistakes. And he didn't communicate what he was doing with people. And he didn't review the work that the AI did, because even though he's an expert in software, if you don't look, AI is great at making things that seem like they're correct, but actually are subtly wrong. And of course, he unfortunately released a version of the tool that was broken in a lot of ways. And the backlash against AI has been really loud. And I'm sure if he was working for someone who was pushing AI, he could easily turn around and say, this is terrible. Everything's broken now. This is not a step forward. We're trying to address security. And at the end of the day, the reason I tell the story is you have to embrace learning about AI. And it's like we went into the domains we went into because we wanted to do that thing, not do AI.
Right.
But the fact is, if you learn how to use AI correctly, you can do the thing that you want to do so much more efficiently from a business use case point of view. It just doesn't make sense.
But it does change your job. And this is similar to the conversation we had.
And that's
when you promote an individual contributor into a management position, or if you go and start a business, not that we know anyone that's done that, and then that you start a business because you're good at something, and then immediately, if you're successful, you stop doing any of the things you're good at, and you start running the business, and that's a career change, right? And the same for managers. You get promoted because you're good at coding, and now you got to be good at people. That's a totally different mindset. And I think AI is a similar transition. It's you were good at coding, and now you got to be good at telling the agents how to code.
It's a classic
different
who
skill.
moved my cheese situation, which is that super insulting book that managers love to trot out because it's like a kid's book. And I literally have been sitting in a room full of professionals at a major Silicon Valley company and been shown the Who Moved Your Cheese kids film and be like,
nice.
Are you effing
There was a kids
kidding
film?
me?
So that like my whole experience of that is that I was at a Fortune 500 early in my career, and we came in every day, and there was a copy of Who Moved My Cheese on everyone's desk. And some manager thought this was a good idea. Yeah. And I watched my boss literally open a desk drawer and slide it over the edge of the desk. It clunked into the desk drawer. He closed it, and that was it. And I'm like, one, that manager was demonstrating good leadership, and two, that was my full exposure to having a mandate from the top that you don't have buy-in from the employees. It just goes into a drawer and it's never seen again, which I think is a very similar thing to what we're seeing now.
Yes.
So managers aren't shutting up about the AI stuff.
It's a terrible way to communicate that the world has changed and we have to adapt. Yeah. It was very insulting. But it doesn't change the fact that as a business in a capitalist system, the business has to adapt, and it will not be competitive if it doesn't adapt. And that means all the employees in the business have to adapt. People might listen to this podcast and think, oh, we love AI, and whatever AI does, we're going to love because we're AI lovers. And I really try to feel like I'm walking the middle line, which is I don't have a choice. The world is moving. So you have to keep current. It's just like there are a few places where maybe you can stand still and do the job you did 100 years ago unchanged. But those are going to be rare.
I would also say one of the reasons we're probably more bought into AI than others is that it's not like our careers haven't been disrupted in the past. I'd say the majority of software developers have lived through 3 to 4 to 5 major transitions in our career. So this is the biggest, I would say, in terms of the day-to-day behavior change. But we've always had to, this thing that we did is now completely out of date and we have to do another thing, to the point where really good software developers know so many technologies because the software programming language we used 2 years ago is out of date now. And now we have to learn some, now we're doing JavaScript, now we're doing Java, now we're doing Rust,
right.
Now we're
so
doing Go,
I think
now we're doing
we're relatively used to having to shift and do something new. So learning how to prompt, learning how to set up a swarm of agents, how to keep them all fed, how to review their work, how to get them to review each other automatically. These are things that we're figuring out, and that's what the rest of the world is going to figure out. And it's all complicated to do that, and which is why adoption, I can see it's lagging. I think leaders maybe don't appreciate how complicated the actual nuts and bolts of getting this to work correctly and to get good output is.
And it's really common, I think, for leaders to be frustrated with their employees because they're not seeing progress, and at the same time not be giving those employees the appropriate resources, care, thoughtfulness in order to give them an environment where they can succeed.
Is it just the same problem that leaders aren't experts in what their people do? They can't be. They have to be high level, big picture thinkers. And at that level, an AI that's spouting 80% correct, 20% bullshit about what people do in their company, a leader maybe can't differentiate that from the actual truth of what people do in their company because they don't know.
It depends on the leader too. A lot of leaders came up doing the work, and so they have an understanding of what that looks like. But there's a lot that goes into leadership bias against employee performance. And when I go and do mentorship, you find this happens a lot. And by and large, it's not, I think my employees are terrible or they're doing a bad job on purpose. I have talked to some owners and who felt that way. They tend to be the people that worked 100 hours a week for 20 or 50 years and they're just miserable. Why aren't my employees, I had a literal conversation with someone once, why aren't my new employees working 70 hours a week? And I'm like, well, are you paying them more? No. Do they own the company? No. Why would they do that? Why would that be a logical thing, dude? You come in at 7 o'clock
and you write down all the license plates in the parking lot and then you leave Friday at 8 p.m. and you do it again.
I think by and large, we all pretty much acknowledge that's bad leadership, including most leaders that I talk to. But there is a distance that comes from running a company over a period of time as your company grows and you get managers, where the leader doesn't have, by definition, access to the right types of information. And your instincts as an individual contributor that come from all the training you got throughout your entire career, even if you're like a low-level manager, it stops working when the information clarity starts going down. And it's very easy then to say, why aren't things moving, and get frustrated. And then just like any other human frustrated, start saying things that are bad and impacting your environment emotionally because you're operating from a position of emotion, when in reality, you should approach those things with curiosity and say, why isn't this working, without assuming blame. It's like one of the conversations we have around EOS and accountability. It's, if your metric, everyone should have a metric that they're held to. And if the metric turns red, it's not immediately you did wrong. It's, we're going to have a conversation about why it turned red without putting any blame into how it got there. Because as soon as you start saying, how did our AI adoption percentage, why didn't it go up? It must have not gone up because of X, Y, or Z. You're not involved in fact finding. You're involved in making stuff up. And especially if you're worried about AI and you're worried about market performance and so on, it's pretty easy to be uncharitable. And managers are humans, owners are humans. And I think one of the things that I beat on constantly when I go talk to other owners is like compassion and empathy is a skill that you need to develop and really learn to lean on first before you start blaming and all these other things. And that would be a leadership podcast. Unfortunately, we're not raised that way in Fortune 500 or Fortune 5000 environments. We're raised the exact opposite. And this is why I like working with mid-market and small business leaders, because they tend to care a lot more about their people. Not that big company don't care about their people, but there's all these other forces they're also beholden to. So that gets us to our break, and then maybe we can dive into the main topic, which is a sidestep from this one.
All right. Nice, elegant transition.
I'm good at those.
You know what? Yeah, but seriously, folks, let's talk about your business. Are you trying to figure out how to actually use AI, not just learn about it? Because that's what Dustin and I do every day. And you can talk to us one-on-one. Just book a free 30-minute session at molo.now, and we'll help you identify a few high-impact places to start for your business. That's molo.now. Now, back to the conversation. Yeah, so the main topic for today, I think it actually ties in with that last thing. Individual contributors not adopting as high, the community for this Rsync open source project really railing on the volunteer who maintains it. There's a lot of skepticism around AI, and yet I have seen firsthand what AI is capable of delivering, and it can deliver good results in significantly less time for less money. I think a business leader would be not being wise to ignore the possibilities that it could do for their company. But you can't do it without bringing everyone along. So how do you talk to the people who are saying, like, I tried it, it doesn't work. Oh, it uses too much energy. It's not ethical. It's stealing. I sometimes feel
where do you even get started?
Where do you get started? Yeah.
Yeah. So this gets back to the compassion and empathy thing. There's a couple great conversations. This is a conversation that comes up quite often when I'm out evangelizing for AI use at companies. And first of all, one of the common things you hear is, but I like what I do. I like doing it the way I do it. I'm good at it. I got into writing because I'm creative and I want to keep being creative. I got it. And then that marketing is just the way to make money on that, right? For example, just a concrete example. I'm really good at coding. I spent an entire career solving these kinds of problems. And now I don't solve those problems anymore. And the reality is, first of all, it is a completely sane, acceptable human reaction to feel a sense of loss when something you enjoy doing is changing, right? And I think as a leader, you're halfway there by just saying that out loud. I think you're halfway there by just telling your people, yeah, I get it. Some of this is going to suck. We're going to have to find new ways to be excited. Our careers are going to change, and the things you like doing, some of those might change. And that there are negatives and there's positives, and you're allowed to feel upset about that. But I think the other pair of that is, but we have to evolve or we're going to die, right? Yeah. And so I need you, the person who is the creative or the coder, to partner with me to figure out a way forward with this tool that is meaningful, that allows you to do work that you find meaningful.
That's a key piece right there.
Still produces value.
So we have to take advantage of the opportunity, but that doesn't mean we can't invest some time in preserving the meaningfulness of the work for the people, because that is super important. You want your workforce to be engaged and energized by their work. If they are beaten down and hate it, especially in a knowledge working industry, the quality of product that you get out of them is going to just be tanked.
Especially with AI. So AI, I heard a great analogy, and I think it's Andrei Karpov, right? One of the AI thinkers. I may be misattributing, but I think it was him who said AI is a chainsaw, not a kitchen knife. And I really love that analogy, because your whole industry of cutting down trees or whatever is changing. You've got this tool it's very powerful. It's very dangerous. It needs training. It needs all these other things. It's a great analogy. But in this particular case, I think one of the things that I would point out to most people who are creative is it is just a tool. Just because you can cut the tree down faster with the chainsaw doesn't mean you always bring the chainsaw to cut down the tree. Doesn't mean that it's always the best use case. And I think if you don't go into a position with your employees or with your direct reports from a mindset of let's find the way to use this tool appropriately, and you just push on them, they're going to use the extremely powerful tool to amplify the worst parts of their job. If you go down the wrong path, you're going to go down the wrong path much more quickly with AI than without.
Exactly. And then you have the sunk cost fallacy, even though it didn't actually cost you anything. And now you're stuck in this mode of operating that's terrible. I see this myself. We thought the coding was the job. It turns out it was on one piece of the job. And we've shrunk how long I spend doing that piece of the job, which means I'm amplifying all the other parts of the job. And yet we haven't necessarily stared at those critically and said, can we make those parts of the job easier to do with AI or less tedious to do with some kind of automation or assistance? Because at the end of the day, I do not want to be someone who says go on the coding assistant and then I have to just play what we call black box QA. Just click on the web page and see if it works and say, oh, it doesn't work, and then sit and wait and then click on the web page and see if it works. That is a ludicrous waste of my time.
Or Claude Code whack-a-mole, right? Where it's on one tab, I'm reading a plan, go. I'm on another tab, reading a plan, go. And all you are is a person who says go on different plans that the AI is delivering to you. And you could have a water bird basically pressing go on your... I think, but on the other side, there is a world where you sit down and AI has taken the majority of the hard labor of creation, of imagination, of creativity off your plate. So you can just, I call it playing jazz. You can just sit there and just purely create. And you have a team of AI workers delivering a constant stream of real things you can look at and touch and
engage
think about
your creative side and brainstorm and not be content to just accept everything, because it's so easy and low cost to push back and say, what if we did it this way? What if we try it that way?
Prototype this. What if we prototype that? What if we could have this tool? Or what if we could do it this way?
Because sometimes when I talk to you and your brother, like, you all are super energized and excited by all this, not despondent, because I think you're finding ways to have that engaged, creative, still experience that's like, it's so fast to realize your ideas. You don't have to sit and do all the grindy parts.
I don't have to wait on Andy to be free to like implement something.
If you can elevate your workforce so that they're all experiencing their job in this sort of delightful, exciting, creative manner, rather than I just wait for Claude to finish and then I have to read 28 pages and it's mind-numbing. And by the end, I'm not even looking. I just sit, that's fine. And then copy goes out and the press release is got some factual errors that are terrible. Or
that's actually really hard, by the way. That's an aside that we might have to dig into in a different podcast, is how to build yourself a mindset where you can get all the way through the document, because using it over and over, it's successful enough that it starts to get pretty easy to say, that's probably okay.
And also, I have thoughts on that too, but maybe another time. Let's write that down.
But I think this gets done when I talk to leaders. I was in a workshop last week with a bunch of small business owners, 10-person-ish, 20-person businesses. And they're having trouble adopting it themselves. And I think the advice applies to whether you're leading a bigger team and you want to get your team engaged, or whether you're leading a small team and you want to get engaged yourself and you kind of don't know what the surface area is. There was this big movement, I don't even know, 10 years ago around innovation, which was the idea of introducing play, the idea of play to your company. And I think this is a great time to bring that concept back, because the real key is to approach it from a sense of play. Give your people some resources and time to play with it without the onerous we need you to be 20% more. We need you to work on this way and this way, or do this thing faster. Just the start is to encourage more of your organization, especially your managers, to play with it so that they can get to those aha moments where they can feel what it might be like to be able to do their job with a more powerful tool that allows them to do more faster,
I love
better,
this idea
and be more
because
creative.
I've seen it fail where there's these mandates and people will invest a ton of engineering and process and whatever to build an AI thing, and then it doesn't actually work because no one validated to the nth degree that the work output that it was producing was be good enough, accurate, actually solve the problem. Whereas when you allow people to play, they discover, oh, wait, this thing it did was amazing. That would be super valuable. Or I played around and tried to get it to make me logos for my clients and be like, oh my God, they're all terrible. Okay, I can't just have it make the logo, but maybe you could use it as a tool to brainstorm. Like, what are the different shapes you could? I'm just making stuff up, but you play with it, come at it from different directions, and you say, actually, this piece of the work that was super tedious, the taking notes in meetings, for example, or summarizing these things I read, maybe you can do a good job of those. And that will now springboard you further into the part that you really need your special brain for to do and not waste your time on those other tedious tasks.
Yeah, I actually ran into a company that does this. They bring people in for an all-day AI workshop, and they just sit around and guide this sense of play, and they encourage people to bring a problem or work with it individually on their individual computer, and they walk around and they basically support, okay, have you tried this, or have you thought about this, or you're getting wrong answer, and they're trying to get that management team or that leadership team to that aha moment, that sense of play. And then once you unlock that, what we see, referring back to the Gallup poll, especially if you can do it in the leadership and the management layer, the managers will then, the direct manager will then evangelize it to their team in a way their team trusts and understands. Because the team is a common adage in software, people, or in business, people leave managers or stay for managers. They don't stay because of the company. They don't stay because of the CEO.
Yeah,
right?
I can see
so
that.
if you get that manager bought in, you can get the employees bought in. But there's this CEOs don't know what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, which I don't, as a CEO myself, I don't think is entirely true, but they certainly don't know what all the leafs, they can't, by definition, right?
Yeah.
And so when the CEO comes on and says you have to use this tool, the guy on the shop floor is, yeah, sure, I roll, and is to some degree legitimate in doing that, as frustrating that is as an owner to acknowledge. But their manager saying, hey, you should look at this, that's the person they're interacting with day to day, that they're sharing all their pains and their concerns with. That's the person who's best positioned to bring them along, right? So I think that's the other part of it. I think, so encouraging that sense of play, I think really emphasizing that it's here as a tool to augment you, not to replace you. And it is a tool designed to make the things that you do better, faster, more creative, so you can get to more meaningful work more quickly. That's one of the main messages that we as leaders need to be bringing.
I have a question for you. Do you think there's a generational difference between young people graduating today and their view on AI versus people?
So this gets to the college. We've all seen probably it's social media where people like Eric Schmidt are getting booed off stage every time they mention AI at colleges. Well, simultaneously, these college kids we know, like some high double digit, I think it was like 80% are using AI to do their homework. And so they'll go and use it to do their homework, and then go to talk to a tool where one of the founders of Google shows up and he says AI and they boo. And there's that cognitive dissonance, I think, in that space. But I think it comes down to two things, having talked to some younger people about this. One is they feel they have to use the AI because they're spending a lot for college and the requirements being put on them are really high. And they do have this power tool that's basically an easy output, right? And then I think the other side is the generations beneath, say, the 35-year-olds right now. So everyone in their 20s, everyone in their teens, they are, especially, I don't know about other countries, but in the US, when you look at the numbers, the dollars, they're objectively worse off than our generation and the generation before us. And that is the first time in the US's history that's been the case, where every generation has been worse. You can't buy a house. The average home buyer now is 40 years old. I bought my first house when I was 20. And all of these economic indicators are going down for them. And so when we were coming up, innovation was a way for us to get more and live better lives. And they are looking at it and seeing innovation taking things away from them. And that is a very big mindset shift. And we can't solve that with or without AI. That's an economic disparity thing where we have to talk about how do we make sure that as we generate wealth in an economy that everyone is lifted and everyone has access to those opportunities. Because when you have Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire, not to get too political, there's a good chance he will be a trillionaire after the SpaceX IPO. You have to ask, what is that? Is a huge portion of the economic wealth generated by the country concentrated in one person. And how do we make sure that as those trillionaires get created, they are bringing and creating opportunities in a way that democratizes access? And so I think that's one of the major drivers is when you would talk to these young people, they're highly disenfranchised. The ones that are just graduating are sending out hundreds of resumes and not getting jobs. And it's pretty easy to point at AI and say, I'm not getting jobs because of AI. But the reality is they weren't getting jobs before AI either. And because it's just become an increasingly difficult market for entry-level people. And AI is definitely not making that easier. It's making it harder. But that is a much harder problem that I think as a business, to some degree, you can't really afford to, there's nothing you can do unless you're in a business that's adjacent to the education field, and there may be a lot you can do. But to some degree, saying I'm not going to adopt this technology that's going to make my business better because access to the advantages of that technology are not distributed in a fair fashion. That's never been how capitalism works. And so there's this great conversation I had with Dylan, my twin, last week about how most of the people who are complaining about the technology are actually, or worried about the technology, are actually worried about the way it's being used and deployed. They're not, it's not actually about the technology. It's about how we're implementing the technology. And that is a broader conversation we need to be having as a society.
Yeah. It feels to me a lot like our financial systems with these overly leveraged futures markets. Do you remember the crash in 2006 was because of these bundled mortgage things, and it was all a bunch of taking something way too far. And a lot of the churn in AI right now is the same thing. Here's this thing that's kind of cool, can do some stuff, and people are immediately taking it to 11 because they want to be the one out front so that when it does actually be able to do the thing, they'll be the first one on the floor doing it. But for the average business, you can't just try to run out ahead of what it's capable of. You're gonna spend way too much money. You're not gonna have good output. But at the same time, you can't ignore it. And so a lot of criticism is legit because they're looking at these people on the fringe and saying does not make sense. And I agree. The fringe stuff doesn't make sense. But you can't then discount the actual good progress that the baseline is making. And the baseline is moving forward.
And what I would say is we've seen multiple types of revolutions where people have been doing this, where they run ahead, where they break things, where you have one-person businesses disrupting. You have news articles about, is it a bubble? Is it too frothy? We've been here before. And there's a couple of things that we can learn from having seen the past few, which is, one, a huge number of the leading edge bleeding innovators are going to lose their shirts. Some percentage of them are going to be enormously successful beyond their wildest dreams. But I think the other thing I would say is in those sorts of cycles, the people who completely ignored the technology lost 100%, basically, almost 100%. The one recipe for failing to capture value is to choose to not play the game and to not learn and understand where these technologies go and how they work, because those are the people who are basically saying, oh, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. It's the way my grandparents did it and the way their grandparents did it. And now the whole industry is somewhere else and they can't find work. And that, I think, is the place business owners need to be. Is you might not need to be like a whole hog. I love this. I'm excited. It's amazing. But you at least need to understand it and the implications on your market and your business and where it might be helpful for you. And if you're not at least going that far, and then the other side is the people that I know in the past revolutions who really managed to capture value were the ones that went out and worked to be excited about it and find the things to be excited, find where it really could provide value. And those were the ones that really leapt ahead of their competition because they were not worried so much about the negatives and they were focused on the positives. Not to say that there aren't negatives. And I think a big chunk of leadership is acknowledging, we're at a weird place with this technology, just like other technologies. It's dangerous. There are drawbacks, there's concerns. It's very reasonable to have those concerns. But what's unreasonable is not investing in understanding its true capabilities and where they might apply. And I think the only part of this argument that we haven't covered that I think is interesting and worth digging in, and maybe in a different podcast because we're coming up on time, would be the ethics of how these models got created and how we live with that ethics. Because to some degree, the genie is out of the bottle, but we don't know how these things were trained. And it's fairly obvious they were trained on publicly available data, but it's also obvious they were trained on non-publicly available data, that they might not have always had all the licenses, or they might have violated fair use, and are we all inherently unethical downstream using this tool at all? And I think the reality is, from a pragmatism perspective, it is worth having that conversation.
But also I feel like maybe not. Maybe we've all been wronged, in which case there'll be a huge class action lawsuit. And guess what? In 10 years, we'll all get our $6 check to settle.
Exactly.
And so it can't be stopped. And it's actually funny. Artists are probably some of the people who've been wronged by that. And what recourse do they have? Almost none. But there's a funny anecdote from my wife. She's an artist and she has a shop on Etsy. And the buzz there is like the almost, would you call it the ethos, the style, the atmosphere has changed in recent years. It used to be all the photographs were perfect, retouched, completely clean white backgrounds. If you're selling a thing, it looks glorious, like it's dewdrop wet, like a berry you want to just eat. And now artists are not doing that because that is the aesthetic of a fake listing. And if it's a real thing, it's going to be in their hand. Their hand will have paint on it. You're going to see the dog in the background. If there's a dog hair on it, it doesn't matter if the model who's showing off the jewelry has a hair out of place. Lean into it, because the realism, this is a real thing. And it's the new selling point. Right. And it's interesting. AI is always going to be a little bit of a lagging thing based on it takes so long to train. It's using data from 2 years ago. It's, I don't know, how you stay in the current moment is always going to take that human touch.
Yeah. And I think from an ethics perspective, this is another social conversation where we have to talk about, as we get and train these models, how do we make sure that the people who are feeding data into it have control of their IP and are compensated at least reasonably for some of these uses and can opt in and out. And that's all law and societal level things. And it actually is pretty interesting, because back at the dawn of digital photography, we were having the same conversation around data provenance and ownership, and what happens if you take someone's IP and then embed it in a digital photo so it's a collage of other IP, and how do we make sure that everyone. And so it's a very similar conversation, and there are ways to do this, but do we have the political will? And I think one of the major takeaways that I've had from conversations that I've had quite recently, which is the real key is not to be one of those pro AI people who, if you're really gung-ho, who are like, it's our way or the highway, genie's out of the lamp. All that might happen to be true, but also acknowledge that the way we struggle through this, and the people who are complaining about these things, about the ethics and about the ecological impacts and so on, that is how laws get changed. That is how regulation gets written. We can't be squashing those voices, because it is very important, as we as implementers move forward with this, that we allow those conversations the space they need for us as a society to figure this out together, because otherwise you're going to get just the hardest core capitalist interpretation possible. And capitalism doesn't take care of humans.
Sometimes you have to change the rules of the game so that we don't destroy our planet.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
no one player in the game is going to be effective at that if the rest of the players are not following the same rules. You can't
It's a classic tragedy.
Now, that's not to say you can't make choices to do better within reason, because you don't have to waste energy if you don't need to. But you also can't ignore the opportunities and realities in front of you. Yeah.
So it's a very nuanced conversation, and I think we're all struggling through it together. And I would just touch back to play and capital. Play and I was almost said capitalism. Play and compassion, not capitalism. Bring the compassion and the play into your capitalism a little bit, like 10%. And at the end of the day, you will be much happier as a business owner or as a manager having done that anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. And your employees will too, because
exactly.
Being fulfilled at work is really important. And as we adapt, we have to remember that.
As we know, hiring good people is really hard. So keeping them happy is a big part of being good at what we do.
Yeah, it is critical. So. Great conversation, Dustin. Thanks, dear listener. Thank you, dear listener. I'm sorry, I've been listening to a TV show where they say that a lot, and that's coming out of me now. But I did want to say, if you're out there exploring AI, you have something specific you want to solve and can't figure it out on your own, or you want to figure out how do you get the rest of your team to see it the way you see it, I think the next step you should take is to talk to us. Dustin and I have made our calendars available on a very simple tool. It's called molo.now. Just go to that website, molo.now, and you can book a meeting with us, and we'd be happy to talk to you. Also, maybe you have some feedback, leave comments. We do read them. Dustin's been keeping tabs on them. We'd love to respond, follow up. You can find this podcast, of course, at modernlogic.io/podcast. There's links there to see us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Our show is produced and edited by Ryan Peterson with additional contributions from Dylan Brusnak, Anna Spitz, and Beth Davis. Our AI mascot was created by the artist Becca Ron. Our theme music is Elastic Vibe by Ziv Morin. If you find the show useful, share it with someone who would benefit, and take a moment to rate and review. It really makes more of a difference than you might think. Modern Logic for Your Business is a production of Modern Logic.